and one of the best coaches in our global community. Please receive Kim Eickhoff. Eickhoff. With a big applause.
Hello.
Hello.
It's just us coaches now, right? Okay. All right, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and how I have found that it can help me grow my coaching practice as well as help my clients grow their business. And it can also, I think, inhibit us from growing our coaching practices if we're not really aware of things. So I'm going to start with a little bit about me. I love inspiring people to step more fully into who they are. And a lot of that means kind of what I talked about the other day, their thoughts, their feelings, honoring all that. And my first experience with emotional intelligence was when I was getting my master's in professional counseling. Back in 2000, I was 30 years old, and I was doing an internship. We had to do an internship as a part of our program, where I was working with children, or adolescents. They were between the ages of 10 and about 18. They're living in a lockdown facility in Atlanta. And most of these kids had pretty harsh emotional challenges. They had been abused in lots of different ways. Some had drug addictions. So it was a real challenging group. And I was, again, only about 30 years old. So I would come home at the end of those days pretty exhausted, listening to their stories, hearing all the stuff they had been through, and then trying to figure out, how to help these kids. And when I would get home at the end of the day, I would fill my bathtub with water and just basically sink into the bathtub with water up to here, because I was just very overwhelmed. And I would then go to my supervision class. So we had a supervision class once a week with one of our professors, along with other students doing their internships. And we would have to share kind of what we were learning, what was challenging for us, and where we were growing, and things like that. And I, one day, in supervision, I guess, was cracking a lot of jokes. I kept trying to make the moment lighter feeling, I think. And my supervisor looked at me and said, "Kim, sometimes your humor is inappropriate." And I, at first, was stunned, and I looked at her, and I kind of got mad at first. I was like, "What is she talking about? No, it's not. No, no, no." And so I kind of just sat there and was like, "What does she mean? What does she mean?" And so later I went to my therapist, because I think we all need therapists. So I had my own therapist, because I have a lot of things to work on too. And I was talking to her, and I told her what my supervisor had said, and she said, well, let's look at this. What do you think about that comment? And so as we talked about it more, I realized that, oh yeah, these sessions were really heavy and very emotional, and I didn't know how to manage my own feelings that were coming up, and I certainly wasn't then managing their feelings that were coming up when they were telling me stuff. And then at the same time, in that supervision class, I was hearing my classmates dealing with really heavy stuff. So I was just not able to deal with it. So my response was to make jokes to try to lighten the mood. So this became something I really started looking at. I went home, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, I was having dinner with my parents, and my parents were like, "So how is, your master's going? How is supervision going? How is your internship?" I said, "Well, it's going well, but this is what happened." And I told my dad, and my dad has a good sense of humor, and he started laughing. He said, "Well, I'm pretty sure you got that from me, because I don't know how to deal with anybody's emotions." And so then I was like, oh, that's where I learned this little mechanism. So what I realized was that I was doing that, and as a disservice from doing that is that I would not be able to be present with people where they were, and then be able to help them transition out of that to something else. So my response was more, shove those feelings aside, what do we need to do, and let's just keep moving, right? And what do we need to accomplish? So that was my first kind of, little insight into it. As I got into coaching, I started to realize how important two pieces to coaching are, for us as coaches, growing our business, but also just for an entrepreneur. So professional development, very important, obviously, right? We are teaching our clients and coaching our clients around the business skills. That's mostly what we're focused on. And with ActionCOACH, we have a great system, and a couple of great systems that we use, and they're really, really fantastic. The other piece, though, is the personal development piece. And I think I mentioned this the other day, but if we aren't working on our own stuff, our businesses do not grow. They grow to a certain level, but then they'll plateau. So my saying is we have to work on our own personal stuff in order to grow our business as well. So this was started to kind of be the piece where I was like, okay, so what do I need to work on to help my business grow? Which obviously was this being present with emotional piece. So, emotional intelligence, what is it exactly? There's two pieces to it really. My emotions, I have to be able to be comfortable with my emotions and what's happening. I have to have an awareness of what my emotions are. And then I also have to be able to control them. That's, for me, has been the bigger challenge. I'm a high I, and we're going to talk a little bit about the disc and how different styles kind of deal with this. But for high I's, we can get very emotional. Who in here is high I? Okay. Are we all highly emotional? Yes. We can get very emotional. Stuff happens and we just, I don't know, it just triggers our emotions very, very big. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to be able to control them. As well as then we have to, oh, that didn't really translate very well, but we have to be able to honor and be able to acknowledge our clients' emotions. So it's not only holding space for our own emotions, but it's holding space for our clients' emotions. And not letting their emotions affect how we end up coaching them. Because that can happen, right? Somebody can come in very upset about something, and all of a sudden I get very upset about it, and then we're off to the races, and maybe not doing the best thing. So I have to not do that. So the main piece of this, kind of underlying everything I'm going to talk about, is about being present. And I know I talk about this a lot, but to me this has been one of the most important things that I've had to learn how to do. It's just being present. I call it holding space. So holding space for myself, what I'm feeling, and being aware of that, but simultaneously holding space for somebody else. So as somebody's sitting with me in my office, or on Zoom, however I'm coaching, can I be present for what's going on with them to validate how they're feeling? This is the most important thing for people, is that we just need to be validated for how we feel about something, right? When something's going on that's challenging, we want to know that somebody else gets it. This is what connection is about. So if I am being vulnerable and sharing something that's hard for me, if somebody just kind of glosses over it and goes on to something else, it doesn't help me all that much. But if somebody can validate how I'm feeling and then help me move out of it, that's much more powerful. And this is not about staying in the muck with somebody necessarily, but it is about validating. So being present is sort of the underlying thing that I want you to think about, that has to be there, because you can't do it without it. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the slides and the techniques that we talk about in ActionCOACH. We all know this slide, right? Blame, excuses, denial, being below the point of power. That's where we're powerless. And above, obviously, is accountability, ownership, and responsibility. The blame is the piece on here that I want you to be thinking about. So when you have a client that's coming in your office who's blaming a lot or making excuses a lot, there's something else going on underneath, and it's usually an emotion. And Brene Brown, who I talked about the other day, talks about blame is the discharge of uncomfortable feeling. So if I'm feeling uncomfortable with something that's happened, if I'm upset about something, I immediately want to put the blame on something else to make myself feel better, right? Somebody, something, hopefully that makes me feel better. It doesn't usually make me feel better for very long because it doesn't solve anything, but that's part of it. So this is one of the areas where you'll see it showing up, is that somebody's having some emotional stuff that you might think about digging into a little deeper. It's because if we just tell people, stop blaming, do they stop? No. We don't know how to just stop. So we have to understand, why are you blaming so much? What's underneath that? Another one's the identity iceberg. In particular, I'm going to talk about the beliefs and identity. I talked about this the other day in my talk as well. This is a lot about what are the things I'm telling myself when I'm by myself, to myself, right? What are all those messages about I am and what I believe about myself? And again, when I don't have the positive feelings or thoughts or understand really who I am, usually my actions, results, decisions, behaviors are not so positive, right? Yes?
Yes.
This is another one, formula for change. I love this one because I think this is a big challenge for most people. Resistance is usually fear. It could be fear of the unknown. It could be fear of just not knowing what you're going to do, right? The success, if you're going to have success or not, or failing. But again, when people come in when there's a lot of resistance, yes, the dissatisfaction, the vision, those need to be super high. We need to have a really clear vision on what we want to create. In order to get over that resistance, we also need to know that we're very, very dissatisfied, or we actually need to be very dissatisfied. But if I'm constantly not working through it and overcoming the fear, again, maybe there's something else going on. And all this is just to get you to think about, how can I help clients look a little deeper? Because sometimes what people come in and they're talking about on the surface is not really what the problem is. Does that make sense? Okay. Perturbation, I love perturbation, it's one of my favorite words. And this is, again, obviously, this is the feeling that we get, right, in our bodies, the uncomfortableness when we're being asked to grow, or being pushed to grow. And we like to talk about, if you move through perturbation, you have success. If you don't, you fail. But again, the perturbation, there's that uncomfortable thing. And so if you don't have tools to help people move through it, knowing about it is helpful. I find people the awareness of, okay, I'm in perturbation. But again, if you don't have a tool to help people move through the perturbation, it doesn't necessarily change. And this is also very true, obviously. You have to have a breakdown, break apart, break with, break up to have a breakthrough. So I've had lots of breakups that I have learned, had big breakthroughs from, right? Where something has gone wrong with something, and I had a huge breakthrough about it, and that helped me do it better the next time. Can others relate to that? Yes? Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about shift, because what I find is this process helps people become better at EQ or emotional intelligence. It's going to show you kind of a process to do that for yourself, but also for your clients. The process itself, I put together just because I was seeing people needed something to help them gain more awareness quickly about what was going on for them. I didn't create the tools. The tools are things that I've learned over the last 30, 20, 25 years, I guess, of my own personal development, everything from meditation to mindfulness to yoga to therapy to exercise. There's all these different pieces in it. So I put it together in a process that I think helps make it a little easier to talk about in a way. And I'm going to walk you through it using an example of a client that I had, and then kind of what came out of it. But at the same time, I want you to be thinking about yourself. It may be a situation either you've been in with a client, or if you have a client that triggers some stuff with you, how you could use this for yourself, okay? And then I'm going to help you, hopefully, find some questions along the way that will help you dig a little deeper when you're talking to clients if you need that. All right, so let me explain what a trigger is first before we get started on the rest of it. So a trigger is anything that creates a pretty strong emotional reaction in me. And this could be somebody says something to me, it could be a situation, I could log into my bank account and see no money in the bank account that causes an emotional reaction. It could be a client that's upset with me about something and calls me and says something, or a partner says something. So it's something that happens that creates an emotional reaction. It doesn't necessarily, the trigger itself is not necessarily positive or negative, it's just a fact. It's just something that happens. I read it a certain way, and it becomes positive or negative to me. So, you can have a not mindful approach or reaction to a trigger, which then creates this habitual response pattern, which I'll talk about in a second, and then you kind of get what you always get, right? It's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again gets you the same results. Or, when this trigger happens, you can have a mindful reaction, and then you create something new, because you're making a choice. Okay? So that's what a trigger is. So, SHIFT is an acronym. I'm going to talk about the words that it stands for, and then I'm going to go into each one. So it stands for sensations, habitual reactions, identify, feelings, and thoughts. And we actually start with the identify, which is why the light blue is lit up. Because as humans, the trigger is what creates all these same things at the same time. For different ones of us, different things show up or are more apparent to us. So I'm going to lead you through this in a process that happens for me, but you can do it in any order that you want. But again, what I want you to be thinking about too are what are signs that you're seeing in a client to help you understand that this might be something that you need to dig a little deeper and talk to them about. So identify is where we start, and that's about the trigger. So we basically wanted to say, what is a trigger? So my example is, I have a client, he came in my office a couple months ago, very upset that one of his customers was not happy with the product they had delivered and basically was refusing to pay. Okay, so that was the trigger. So he comes in very upset about this. So I asked him, well, I knew what the trigger was because he comes in and he tells me. So basically the trigger is, he gets an email, the client says, or the customer says, you know, we're not happy with how this has turned out, we're not going to pay you the rest of the money. So he comes in very upset about that. What he's about to do is not going to be helpful, and so this is why this is important, because he's talking about all these things he's going to do. I'm going to sue him, he's already jumped to all this stuff. So my job was, in that moment, it felt like, was to help slow him down and pick this thing apart to figure out what can we do to fix the problem, but at the same time to help him understand how he was jumping to conclusions and to help him see that what he was about to do, which was fire him and scream at him and, you know, get a lawyer involved and all of that, was not really what we needed to do. Okay? So I start with feelings just because I'm high. Feelings are very apparent for me. So I'm going to talk about it through this direction. So feelings, there are 5 main big feelings. So we have enjoyment, we have anger, disgust, sadness, and fear. So we have one really positive feeling and all the other 4 are not so positive. But these are the big feelings that we have. Most of the time, I would say most people feel fear or anger and then some sadness. But the fear and the anger are usually the easy ones to talk about, right? I'm angry, I'm pissed off, or, you know, I'm scared. So those are the 4 big negative ones. So what my approach is then to ask, like, so what are you feeling in this moment, basically? And to help him start to identify what's going on. There's also an intensity level with feelings. So sometimes we can have fear. So this is an example. There's a great website that I highly recommend you check out, atlasofemotions.org. And it's a cool interactive website that somebody created that you can click on, and the different emotions will kind of blow up, and then you'll see a scale of least intense to most intense. Now, the purpose of this cool website is to help clients and help you create or develop a larger vocabulary around emotions. Besides just being fearful, this talks about trepidation being on the least intense side, up to terror being on the most intense side. And anxiety is somewhere in the middle. That's another one we hear a lot, right? I'm anxious or whatever. So you want to know what's the feeling that they're feeling, and then what kind of intensity level is it, just so you can have an idea of where they are. This is also to help them become more aware of who they are, which is what we talked about last time. Because becoming more aware of my emotions and understanding how they play into my life, and really how they actually control my life and dictate my life, is a really, really powerful tool to have. So, I started asking the questions. I'm like, what's the primary feeling you're having in this moment? What's the intensity level? And then what's the combination of those feelings? So he was like, I'm angry and I'm upset. And so I said, okay. We talked about the anger. And the anger was kind of in the middle. The upset was kind of on the low end. So upsetness is part of sadness, which you'll see when you look at the feelings on this. But the real feeling, so I started asking more, I said, so is there any fear going on? And he said, oh yeah, I'm really afraid because I don't know if I can make payroll now because they're not paying their bill. So that was really the most important piece for him to understand, was that he was reacting from a fear place. Okay? And this is why he was overreacting and ready to do all this stuff. Does that make sense? Okay. So then you go to thoughts, and you ask, well, there's something, okay, so about thoughts, there's 2 layers to thoughts. So there's the stories I'm telling myself, which are things like, stories are things that we tell ourselves that we don't actually know are true or not. I had another client who, one of her employees kept doing something wrong, and she called me, and she was very angry about it, and she said, she keeps doing this wrong. I don't know why she keeps doing it wrong, she keeps doing it wrong. I said, well, what do you think is going on? And she said, well, I think she's just doing it to piss me off. And I'm like, so your employees like to just piss you off? Like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, right? Who wants to really piss off their boss? Nobody wants to do that. So I said, well, are you sure that's true, or is that a story? She's like, oh, I don't know if it's true. I haven't actually asked her that. I was like, well, why don't you talk to her and just find out? Just get curious and find out what's really going on. So stories are usually somebody's doing something to us, somebody cuts me off in traffic, you know, they're an idiot, they don't care about me, they don't look around, whatever it is. We're making up these stories. They're not necessarily true. So stories you have to check out. And then the second layer are my old beliefs about myself. So the old beliefs about myself help drive our stories. So in this case, I asked my client, so what are the stories that you're telling yourself about this right now? He said that I'm not going to be able to make payroll, we're going to go bankrupt, I'm going to have no money, that the client thinks I'm an idiot because we didn't do this right. So he had a list of just a gazillion things. And I said, well, what of these have you actually checked out? What's true? And he was like, well, I haven't checked any of them out. And the stuff about going bankrupt hadn't happened yet, so it wasn't actually true, it was just a story. And I knew that we would figure it out and we weren't going to go bankrupt. And he had made all these stories up in his head, and so he was spinning himself up more and more and more and more and more, and getting more and more fearful, okay? More and more anxiety. His old beliefs about himself is that he's not worthy of success, that he'll never be successful. So all of those old beliefs were driving all of these stories. Does that make sense? That connection? Okay. So when you have a client that comes in upset or fearful or having a hard day, it's good to start asking them some questions to try to understand. You can use the word stories, you can just say, what are you telling yourself about this right now? And just start digging in a little deeper. Have them talk about that, and you'll start to see, oh, this is actually not really true, or we don't know if it's true, but they are off believing that it is. So how can I help this person come back to the present, right? And be in the facts. What are the old beliefs that you're telling yourself about this that are coming up? The interesting thing about the thoughts and the feelings when you get triggered is that this thing that triggers it is not actually the biggest problem. It's triggering old stuff from a long time ago. And this could be a therapy issue. So this is not what I get into as a coach, but I'm starting to see stuff like that, like, oh, this person has had trauma that's happened, or there's been something that maybe they haven't dealt with, or that they need to go back and deal with. These are good hints, right? So it's kind of like, if I have a wound, and somebody comes up to me and pokes the wound, it's that old wound that they're poking, is that old stuff that comes up. And that's where all these strong emotions come from. Because usually, if something upsets somebody so much, it doesn't usually upset somebody else so much. Does that make sense? So something can happen to one person that they're like, this is the worst thing in the world, and then it can happen to me, and I'm like, this is not that bad, because it's not my issue. So when it's your issue, we get triggered really, really heavily, and our emotions come flying up, and then all these thoughts that are part and connected to those emotions come flying up. Does that make sense? I know this is getting a little deep, but okay. All right. So that's what's really good to be aware of. So if somebody is very upset, one of your clients, being able to sit there and listen to that and ask the deeper questions and not gloss over their feelings, not gloss over what they're telling themselves, but just kind of listen and understand it, I think helps me as a coach to know this is something this person needs to address more seriously with a therapist, or I just need to help them see this stuff, because awareness is most of it. If we're not aware, we can't make any changes, okay? So then we go to the habitual reaction. So these are the actions that we take as a result of feeling uncomfortable. We want to do something to get rid of the feelings, right? We have perturbation, and people want to do something to get rid of the feelings. And it's not always the best decision. So I've had clients in perturbation where their teams are growing, they're being challenged with new people, trying to hire new people, train new people, and it's hard, and they feel like they're not making enough money, and so all they want to do is fire everybody and go back and do it all themselves, because they don't have to deal with the perturbation. And that's not really necessarily a great decision, right? So you're just making a split decision on how you're feeling to get rid of that uncomfortableness. And habitual reactions are what we do to deal with our uncomfortableness. Usually we've created habitual reactions from childhood. We did them to deal with whatever we were feeling, and we didn't know how to do something else. We didn't know how to process our feelings at that point, or our emotions. So we did different things. So there's different things that we do. Blame and make excuses, what I was talking about earlier. You're hearing that. That is definitely something that's a habitual reaction that we just do as a result of being uncomfortable. Fight, flight, or freeze, these are the stress responses. Some people go into fight mode, they want to lash out, right? Not necessarily physically, but they will yell at people, get angry. High Ds are a bit like this, they jump to that anger. Withdraw, some people, the higher C's and S's tend to do this. They don't like to deal with their feelings, they don't want to talk about it, so they tend to withdraw or shut down, right? Just can't deal with it at all. And then sometimes we numb, and there's lots of ways to numb. There's alcohol, there's just spending time on Facebook, social media, Netflix, food. There's tons of ways, shopping. We do this when we're feeling something we don't know how to feel and how to process. And so we go to something to try to get rid of that feeling. Can anybody relate to this? Am I the only one that does this? Yes? Okay. So, these are the things that happen. These are the habitual reactions. And usually, our habitual reactions are not, they don't get us where we want to go. This is when we just kind of make a reaction to something or take a reaction to something. And it's not mindful. We don't necessarily get to where we want to go because we're just doing these things. Okay? So again, you want to find out, like, what does my client do when they're feeling like this? And for this particular client that I'm talking about, he gets angry. He's an ID. He lashes out, he blames his team, he immediately starts looking for the problem person. How can he fire somebody to make this feeling go away, right? That'll make me feel better. And then he gets angry at the client. And the things that he has done in the past is fire people, is fire clients or customers, and that doesn't always get him where he wants to go, because then he ends up in a bigger problem. And it's not usually the employee's fault necessarily, and it's definitely not usually the customer's fault. It's usually his fault, or our fault, as the team, for setting up expectations correctly, and explaining how things really are going to go. And then the final piece of this is sensations, I call it. And these are actually the physiological reaction that you have in your body to an emotion. So an emotion is energy in motion, and they get stuck in the body. So it's from a long time ago, whenever these issues are created in us, and this is not about blaming parents or teachers or anything like that, but we're all human, so we do things to each other, and sometimes, we create all these stories, these feelings, and those can get stuck. And so when these triggers happen, those old emotions are coming up, and the sensations that we feel from them can be things like your throat gets tight, chest feels heavy, you might breathe faster and shallower, your heart beats faster, you might sweat, you might feel like there's a rock in your stomach. It's uncomfortable in the body. And a lot of us are kind of disconnected from our heads down. And so when this happens, We don't like how it feels, so we go to our habitual reactions to get rid of it. Okay? So the sensations piece is probably the most important piece of this. So what am I feeling in my body? That's a good question to ask them. You feel like your throat, your chest, your stomach. It can be different sensations, so tingling, sharp, heaviness, and then what is your breathing like? Is it shallow or fast? All these different things, because you want people to start having more awareness. Like, why? What is happening? All this stuff is connected, and again, all this stuff happens simultaneously. It's all very quick when we get triggered. But if I'm not aware of what's going on with me, and I'm just reacting, I'm going to keep creating the same problems in my life that I've had over and over and over again. So with my client, when his habitual reaction is to fire a team member, to blame the team member and fire somebody, then all of a sudden, he's in a situation where, I mean, what happens to the rest of the team? Low morale, right? People get down about working there because they're like, well, this sucks. This guy's just going to fire us when something happens. And then we have to go through the whole hiring process again. So that doesn't work. It didn't work for him. It kept screwing his business up. So helping him understand all of these pieces that were happening helped him to move out of that. So the practice to do is sort of a meditation, but it's really more about the body. So everybody put your feet flat on the ground. If you all play along, I'm going to lead you through a little thing. I just want you to kind of look and see if you can feel something. So before we do this, think about, it could be maybe in the last couple of days, something happened or somebody said something to you that made you angry or fearful, okay? You have something in mind? So what I'm going to ask you to do is close your eyes, or look down at the floor if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, and just breathe for a couple of minutes. Take some deep inhales and exhales. And I want you to think about that situation that either made you fearful or angry. And see if you can kind of bring that anger and fear up. And just notice if anything shows up in your body, anywhere, in your throat, in your heart, in your stomach, tingling or sharp or heaviness, and just watch it and notice it. You don't have to do anything about it. Change it. And if you can feel it, I want you to just get really present with it. So take your awareness into that feeling, into that sensation, and just be there with it and watch it. And I'm going to shut up for the next minute and just see what happens. Watch it. Don't think about it. Don't try to change it. Just watch it. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. So did anybody feel anything in your body? Okay. This is a technique called letting go. And what you'll notice is that when you get really present with that sensation, it will start to dissipate. And you may need to sit with it longer than what we did here. But the idea is that the energy will start to dissipate, and sometimes it moves to a different part of the body, but eventually it will go away. And the coolest thing about that is you're processing old emotions that you haven't processed before. And so when you can just be present with them and allow them to dissipate, The anxiety goes with it, the thoughts go with it, the feelings go with it. You'll come out of it being super present and very clear and very calm. Can anybody feel that just from the little bit that we did? Okay. So, my recommendation is for you as a coach, when you're sitting with a client and they are in a state of whatever feelings that they're having, being present with yourself and watching what's happening for you. So what emotions am I feeling as a result? Where in my body am I feeling this? And you can do this and still listen, so I don't want you distracted and not paying attention. But you can just feel your body and just honestly kind of pay attention to what's happening with them and feel it internally. And allow it to dissipate. Don't hold on to it, just let it go. But that will give you a very good clue for you as to what they're feeling. And for you, it is triggering stuff in you as well, so it's about allowing that to just process out, so that you're not then going to react in a way that's not helpful. You will be much more present and much more clear when you do have something else to say. Okay? Because a lot of times, we don't know the answers. We're not supposed to know all the answers, right? But we have to know or be present enough to allow the right questions to come in, to allow the right thing that needs to be said or not, or just validate how they're feeling. Whatever it is, you just know better what to do because you're more present with yourself. Okay? So, when you get triggered about something else too, as well, practice this. Instead of running to your habitual reaction, whatever it is, around whatever your issues are, stop and just feel it and let it come out. There's a guy named David Hawkins, has a book called Letting Go, and he goes into great depth about this. Talks about each emotion, where it is on the frequency scale, how to process it and let it go. Okay? The coolest thing about this too is the more you process old stuff, old negative stuff, the higher your vibration goes, and the more you attract good stuff. Because we all talk about law of attraction, right? We gotta attract good stuff. We gotta be at this high vibration. You can't just jump from a low vibration to a high vibration. You have to heal stuff and let it go, and you slowly move up that vibration or that frequency ladder, and then you're into a different space where you can attract good stuff. But we have to let go of the old stuff and the negative stuff, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So doing that for yourself, doing that during a session is very powerful. Teaching a client that technique is very powerful. D's, as coaches, so as clients, high D's that I have found, and I love these, I'm not trying to pick on you, but they don't really like doing this kind of stuff. It feels slow, and it feels, it's not results oriented enough, right? It's like, I don't have time to worry about my feelings, I just want to get this done. And my whole point with them is you have to figure out how to deal with the feelings, because they're just going to keep coming back and screwing things up. So if you don't actually take the time, you're never going to get to where you want to go. Okay? So D's have a hard time as clients. Coaches, I'm guessing, is similar, right? We like, I'm not an ID, I'm a high I, but we like results for people. We want to see success. Sometimes we have to slow it down, especially with D's, and help them process stuff to actually get there. High I's, we get way too emotional, and so we get so wrapped up in the emotions, we can't actually do anything. So we have to figure out how do we process our emotions and then make our steps. And then S's and C's are interesting also. S's are all about taking care of everybody else, right? Harmony. I want people to feel good and do well, but they don't take care of themselves. And so teaching them this technique is very important. And then C's are also more about, kind of like the D's, not obviously as like driven as a D, but I don't like the touchy-feely stuff, right? There's no facts around this. This feels very fuzzy for me as a C, and I don't necessarily want to do that. So as coaches, we have to know our own styles and how we're dealing with our own emotions. And Ming talked about that before, which is really cool, about the emotional reaction to different things as different styles. And then also, how is it showing up with our clients? Okay? So that's a process overall. I know that's quite quick. If you have any questions, please let me know. I can try to clarify. Now I want to talk about EQ in the real world. So emotional intelligence and how it shows up in the real world. Justin Bariso has a book called EQ Applied. And I thought these were all very interesting. So the first thing is, somebody with high IQ thinks about feelings. Kind of what we've been talking about. We like to think about our feelings and other people's feelings. This is a very important piece, the empathy piece, being present with somebody else. Okay? Number 2 is we pause. So being able to say, you know, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, I need to take 10 minutes, and I'll get back to you with my answer. That kind of stuff's very important. That's very hard for high I's. It's probably not so hard for C's and S's. What's hard for C's and S's is they don't actually communicate it, they just do it. They just kind of disappear on you. You're like, where'd you go? High I's feel it, and sometimes don't even do it. We just blurt out whatever we're feeling. And D's, again, they shove the feelings aside and just go. So, pausing to get clear and get more mindful about what you're going to do. I say during that time, process what you're feeling. Bless you. You strive to control your thoughts. So this is the other piece that we've talked about, right? Being aware of what you're thinking, how it's creating your emotions, and then how that is creating your habitual reactions to something. So what can I do to work on my thoughts so that my feelings change? Benefit from criticism. So this is another one that people with high emotional intelligence, even if somebody tells them something critical that's not very kind, at some point they will try to figure out what can they learn from this. Okay? Now it's better if we can tell people things in a kind way that they need to hear, because we all need to learn what we need to learn and grow, obviously. But when we do that, if we can look at it, it's like, okay, so this is something somebody said, kind of like my teacher, right? Your humor is sometimes inappropriate. I got mad at first, but then I was like, what does this mean, and what can I do to learn about this? So we take criticism, we like to learn. Show authenticity. So that doesn't mean you're completely open about everything in your life. Obviously there are boundaries to things. But it does mean you can be there and be real with someone. And listen to them being vulnerable. And you can be vulnerable when it's appropriate to share. I found that connecting with clients a lot of times is helping them see that I am as flawed as they are, and that I am working on things just as much as they are. I have a women's entrepreneur group that I coach, and it's a lot of what we talk about, because women, for some reason, we think we have to do everything exceptionally well, and we can't screw anything up, and so there's a lot of expectations that we put on ourselves. It's not even other people putting them on us, it's us. And so we have all these expectations we think we need to do, and we can't do anything then you can't do anything well. So a lot of us just talking about, these are challenges that we all have. It's not just you, right? And I think when people hear that, that's why Growth Club is so powerful. Y'all experience that at Growth Club, where other entrepreneurs can hear all the problems that everybody else is having as well, and like, oh, I'm not the only one. And I think that's true as coaches, to know that it's not easy doing this work, right? There's a lot of challenges that we have, and we're dealing with people, and there's a lot of variables. And so when we can show that authenticity with people, that shows you have a high IQ, but it's also going to help you connect with people better. And demonstrate empathy. This is obviously very important to be able to be present with somebody again, with where they are, and validate that. Praise others. So giving lots of great feedback to people, lots of great, highlighting people when they do a good job instead of brushing it aside or taking credit for it. It's not yours to take credit for. That's frustrating, so letting others know that. Give helpful feedback. This is probably one of the more challenging ones, right? Giving feedback that's hard to give, but in a helpful way. So when you have a high EQ, you can do that. Apologize. Who's great at apologizing? a good one. If you want to higher EQ and connect with people, apologize. The thing that I think is interesting about this that he writes about in the book is apologizing doesn't necessarily mean you're saying you're wrong, but it means you're saying this relationship is more important than my ego. So I say I'm sorry a lot, and I have friends that are like, oh, you're not, why are you sorry? You don't need to. It's like, I'm sorry. I know it's not my fault whatever's happened, but it's more, I want us to be able to get past this, and this is more important to me than, you know, my way being the right way and your way not, or whatever, okay? You forgive and forget. So, are we good at that? Sometimes we're good at forgiving for the moment, but we don't forget. And then we bring it back over and over and over again. So you have to be able to let go. And forgiving to me means, I'm not condoning what you did. I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm going to let it go. Because if I'm going to stay angry about it, that's extra energy I keep putting to something that doesn't need to be there. Forgetting means at some point, you know, I'm not going to bring it back up. How many people have been in those situations where you have a whole conversation, you feel like you've worked through it, you feel like everything's good, and then 2 days later, the person's bringing it up again, saying, but you remember this, did it? And I'm like, we already talked about that, and we resolved it. And they like to bring it back up. That's not helpful. It doesn't do any good. So you keep your commitments. This is all about not only big commitments, but little commitments, right? Following through on things with kids, if you have kids, if you promise things, or spouses. And it can be little, it can be big, but just following through is about being in integrity, doing what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. You like to help others, high EQ. I think most of us in here would probably say we like to help others. Is that true? As coaches, right? That's why we do this. I know for me, like when I have a client that comes in and you've seen their progress, right, in the business, and they've just had something amazing just happen, it's just the best feeling that you've been able to be a part of that, right? Supporting them, helping them see what they need to see. I have a client who's a photographer, and she has a thing called the Passions Project, and she photographs older adults doing their passion. And assisted living places in the United States anyway, they purchase these big products and projects. They're like $20,000 projects, so they're big projects. And they put them on the walls so they can show their residents doing the things they love. And when we started working together, she had only sold one. And now she's sold 15 or so, a couple of years later. And she's like being asked to be a presenter at all these big conferences now, talking about aging and how we're trying to redefine that. She's writing articles, she's being asked to be on podcasts, so she's doing all this stuff, and she just came in the other day just lit up, so excited about all these things she gets to do, and that is very cool when you see people being able to do that. And then you protect yourself from emotional sabotage. So when you're very, very aware of your feelings and your emotions, you know when someone else is trying to manipulate them. Have you ever known somebody who likes to manipulate emotions? Yes. This is a big thing, right? Where people who are really good at this can use this power for bad. So you can manipulate it. You know what buttons to push and how to get something that you want from somebody, and people can do that. People do that. And so when you're very aware of yourself and have a high EQ, you're able to really control that and be aware of that, and then help see when somebody's trying to do that so you're not taken advantage of. It's a hard thing to learn. So that's the overall thing around EQ, the challenge of understanding your own emotions, who you are, what you feel, how to manage them, right? Sitting with your clients as they have their own, not shoving emotions under the rug, but paying attention to them, and then helping them process them at the same time, the importance of that. And then how it shows up in the world, how you need to be as a coach, and then how this is going to help your practice. So as a coach, been working on this for myself, it helps me see when I don't do this well, how it affects a client. There used to be lots of times in the beginning where somebody would come in. I had a client that was always having cash flow problems, so she would call me with a cash flow freak out moment, and I would immediately go into fix-it mode. Like, okay, what do we need to do? And then we'd be right back in the situation the next day, right back in the situation the next week. So all the stuff that I was trying to do to help her, while they were short little fix-its, they weren't doing a whole lot of good, right? We weren't really getting out of it. So once I realized what I was doing, and that this was freaking me out, because that was triggering me about my own cash flow, because all of a sudden, right, client doesn't have cash flow, what does that mean? I'm probably not getting paid either, so my stuff comes up, right? So being able to see that and be like, okay, I need to be present and figure out a better path with this client and help them figure out how to fix this problem, really. So what's going on underneath? So we started doing a lot of this work to understand what's driving the cash flow problems, what's our money mindset, what's all that stuff. And once we started fixing that, the cash flow problem started fixing. But when I reacted out of a fear place, it didn't really help. So it's helped me grow my practice in a way to not only make more money, but also to work more with people who I know I can help more. Because those people who want to learn this want to work with me. And then I'm happier also, because I get to work with those kinds of people. So it all fits together nicely. So that's emotional intelligence. Can I take some questions, do you think? Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Thanks, Kate, for this presentation. I love the way that you describe when you ask, are you good for apologize? I love the way that you describe what it means. Then a question comes to me. If I'm gonna be apologized for something that I'm not wrong, or that relation occurs to me, how do you deal with the feeling after you ask forgiveness for something that you didn't do wrong? Because you want to, after that situation, my feeling is anger.
Because you apologized and it wasn't your fault?
Exactly.
Okay. I don't know that you need to apologize necessarily in those situations, right? I think it's more asking more questions of the other person about what's really going on to try to understand. Because are they blaming you for something or thinking it's your fault?
I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
My brother.
Brother?
Yeah, I have a brother that all the time I need to ask, forgive me for something that he's blaming. And he's smart for how the way deal the situation. And if I want to keep talking with him, then I need to give up and say, forgive me. He never going to ask for something, forgive me for something that he feel bad, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all the time I apologize for something I did wrong, but my feeling after that situation is anger, just to keep the relation with my brother.
So if you don't apologize, he won't have that relationship. You have to apologize.
Exactly.
Okay. So he lives in a very blaming place, it sounds like.
Right.
Very victim-y.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I would probably at some point, this would be when he's not triggered, right? But have a separate conversation just to say, I just have some questions about this because it seems like you like to blame me for lots of these things and I actually don't know that they're my fault. What's really going on? Can we talk about kind of what else is going on? And start asking him some other questions?
Yeah, it's hard because all the time that I make a question, he knows that I'm going to go to the point and he avoids it.
Yeah, you know what? And sometimes there are just people like that in our lives, right? They're just they're not very emotionally intelligent, they don't have a desire to be, and that's fine, that's where they are. I guess what I would do is just try to look at, if I'm apologizing and I know it's not my fault, that this relationship is more important, and that my ego is okay. Like, does it really matter if you're wrong or right? And it's just about your ego, because eventually our egos come back in, but I wasn't wrong. It's like, well, does it really matter you weren't wrong? And then there's a big spiritual teacher that says, do you want to be wrong, or do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy?
Yeah.
right? So it's the difference, and we can make a choice. And you just have to know, like, you know what, to have this relationship with my brother, if it's important, I'm just gonna have to be like, okay, this is part of what it is. That I wouldn't be a doormat either, you know? I mean, I would try to have a bigger conversation with him at some point, probably.
Yeah, thank you. I want to see happy bird.
Oh, we are. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Emilio from Mexico.
Hello.
Chiapas, Mexico. Can you share a little bit more how to handle with the D clients, because they all the time are goal-oriented, and sometimes they don't put attention to emotions. But I realized that with some clients, he looked like very optimistic. We can do it, but you can see some kind of emotions there. How do you handle the part of the emotion? Because if you try with a D, start talking about that, he would, no, we're not going that way.
Right.
So, how do you handle this part with the D clients, and how, what we can do for have a very chat about this subject and how to handle?
What I have done with D clients is I basically put it back in their face. Because they will push, right, everybody else on how to do things. So if I have a D client that doesn't want to look at their emotions and they keep stopping me to talk about that, eventually what I just say is, I talk about myself, I'm feeling very frustrated right now. Because I know what's going to help you is to process this, and you don't want to go there. Can we talk about that? So again, it's like, how do I get them to talk? You don't have to talk about the feelings necessarily, but how do you get them to talk about the fear around talking about the feelings? Does that make sense? In sort of a roundabout way, and just asking questions. Now, you don't even have to bring up the word feelings if you don't want to, but I find if I stand against them and just, no, we're not going to talk about it, right? We need to talk about this stuff. Eventually that they will, or they don't, but they don't necessarily get the results if they don't. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
That's okay.
Talking about criticism,
Yeah.
can you share some tactics to get the benefit from criticism, especially when these critics are coming with labels? I give you an example. I've been criticized from my sister, I don't remember exactly, it was hairstyle, no? So when you have that type of relationship, which is, you have some points that can, the criticism is a trigger to fire you up.
Right.
Yes, how can we handle that?
Are you talking about how can you handle it for yourself?
Yes, for myself.
When you get criticized or
Yeah.
feel like you're...
Yeah.
So the first thing that I would do is I would ask myself, so what are the stories that I'm telling myself right now? Because a lot of times somebody's going to say something to you that you will see as criticism, right? Or you will read it as criticism, hear it as criticism. It may not be criticism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people can say something to us, but because it triggers how somebody treated us in the past, we go automatically to, I am feeling criticized, this person's putting me down, and the other person may not be. So it's really more what's going on up here for you. Like, am I telling myself this person's criticizing me? Or is this person just telling me a better way to do something, or showing me a better way to do something? And can that be okay? Does my way have to be right or wrong? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Because a lot of times it is like what we've learned in the past. So we automatically jump to, oh, this feels like criticism, and we get angry and we go at that place. But it's not always.
Yeah. So the question is the key.
Yes. Asking yourself those questions like, okay, so is this my story? What does this come from? What am I feeling? What is this connected to for me? If it's your sister, right? Oh, my sister criticized me my whole life, and so now when somebody says something, it feels like criticism. oh, is this really, and then ask them, like, so my story is, you're criticizing me. And if they are, they'll say yes. If they're not, which a lot of times they're not, they'll say, oh, no, that's not what I meant to say at all, it was this. I was just trying to point this out.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, Kim. In your experience, which are your habits, everyday habit or weekly habit, to be in high frequency?
Oh, high frequency? A lot of it's this, so processing stuff, feeling stuff, right, letting stuff go. I have a practice in the middle of the night, if I wake up anxious or fearful about things, I actually just kind of lay with my hands open and just imagine that stuff going away and feeling it, and then just bringing in the highest vibration I can, just like attracting it, if that makes sense. Other things are just taking care of yourself, right? So taking care of your body, sort of the things we talked about the other day, seeing your value. So practicing healthy techniques, exercise, eating well, surrounding yourself with people that are positive is very important, right? We talk about, somebody at the Action Coach conference that I was at in Nashville for North America was talking about habits, and he's like, the top 5 people you surround yourself with are the habits that you take on, right? They're similar. So be very aware of the top 5 people you surround yourself with. Because if they're not doing things that make you grow, you're probably not. So I would say things like that.
But do you have like a everyday habit? I wake up, for example,
So I wake up every day, and for the most part, I do a little meditation. I like to read pieces of spiritual books in the morning, just like a little chapter, a little paragraph. It doesn't have to be a lot. I journal a lot, so I love just, it's almost like a brain dumping kind of idea. I just write what's in my head, so it helps me see more about my thoughts and how crazy they are sometimes. I'm like, wow, where did that come from? But just getting it out on paper, it helps to kind of get it out. Exercise, being outside, being in nature is one of the best things to do on a regular basis if you can. If you have animals, they're the little animals that we have, I don't know if y'all like dogs and cats, but they're present, right? They're super present. They're not thinking necessarily about anything else but that moment, and so being present with those, anything that can get you grounded and present. Yoga.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Hi.
Hi, Kim. You spoke previously about people who tend to steer your triggers,
Yeah.
so you have certain behaviors, and you sometimes feel manipulated into those behaviors. What kind of advice do you have towards steering the conversation of, instead of confrontation, of trying to reach the same level of probably emotional intelligence as them? Because if they steer you towards those reactions, they probably have a higher emotional intelligence than you have. Instead of confronting them, what advice do you have to reach a conversation point where there is a positive outcome and there is a win-win situation on both sides?
So you're talking about if I'm in a conversation with someone who is trying to manipulate me?
Or has manipulated my
In the past?
reactions, exactly.
Okay.
That knows my triggers and, knows
Yes.
where to put, as we say, put the finger in the wound.
Right. I always say that parents, no offense to parents, but parents are like this, right? Because they install our triggers, so they know exactly where they are. One, I would say, if you can not be around those people, don't be around those people. If that's not possible, then really it's about knowing yourself and being really, really grounded in yourself and listening, I think, truly to your intuition, to pay attention to this does not feel right? Because sometimes people who are master manipulators, they're narcissists, or it's kind of the term that's thrown around these days, they know exactly what you're saying. They know exactly what to do to manipulate you. They understand what your triggers are, so they will do that. And a lot of times, for me, it's just about knowing that this person can do this and just being very aware of it. And then, having a conversation with them is hard because you can't ever win. It's never going to be, you're never going to be right necessarily. So for me, it's just been more about, okay, meeting them where they are, letting them be that in that place, but still knowing what I need to do or what's going to work for me, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
I don't know that you can change them at all. Well, I know you can't, but. Hi.
Hi, Kim. I'm Luis from Guatemala.
Hi.
I just started coaching like a month ago, and I have had the urges that you were talking about to solve the little issues or problems. And I am also a high D, so I want to see results very, very fast. And even though I know that I should be working on the big issues, I also have the urges to solve the big things.
Yeah.
So what helped you, or do you have any advice on how to control those urges on myself and try to focus on the big issues with my clients?
I would say, how emotionally intelligent do you feel like you are about yourself? About your own
50%.
That's what I would work on. The stronger you become with your own emotions and become more aware, the better you can handle somebody else and you can meet them where they are and not have to fix them or fix their problem. Because what's actually happening is you're getting triggered, your stuff is getting triggered, and you're wanting to help them to alleviate your own uncomfortableness. And so the more that you, kind of what I was talking about, can feel and process those emotions that come up for you and let them go and know that I don't have to fix anything, I just have to be here and help them plan, the better you'll be at that. But right now, what sounds like is happening is that you're just reacting because of your own stuff. That makes sense? Yeah. Yeah. So just, honestly, it's working on yourself. The more you work on yourself and you get more aware about all this stuff and you become more tuned in, it's much easier.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll do that.
All right.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you very much.
Yeah.
We are from Guadalajara. I just have a very simple question. I mean, we are coaches and that's what we do, right? But there are times in which we have to acknowledge that those situations happening to our clients are beyond our professional skills. So when should we propose them to go to therapy with the psychologist or so on?
Yeah.
That would be my question.
That's your question?
Yes.
I think what you just said, right? If a problem is constantly coming up and they either can't see it, they just cannot see it, that's usually one good clue that they probably need therapy because there's something blocking them from seeing it. And it could be something big, like something traumatic has happened and they're not ready yet to deal with it. So making that suggestion, you can't make anybody go, obviously, to therapy. But the other issue is when I talk about this stuff with people and start talking about their thoughts and their emotions, and if they start bringing that stuff that's very heavy, that's also a good sign that I usually ask, I'm like, so have you been to therapy about this? Have you dealt with this in therapy? If they say yes, and they have a control over it, they understand it, that's a different situation. If they're like, no, I'm just realizing all this now, then that's when I would ask them to get a therapist or suggest it. Does that help?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Hello, Kim. This is Rafael from Spain.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. It's been great.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you had some troubles in the past with your sense of humor. I feel the same. And I know that sometimes it's hard as anybody.
Yeah.
So you talk to your therapist, and how do you have control of this in your life? Because it's something that happens to me since I was young. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things I started doing was to ask myself before I said anything, if I had a joke or a little one-liner, right, that I wanted to throw in, I would ask myself, is this really going to add value to this conversation? Or is this really about me getting attention and trying to diffuse how I'm feeling right now? And if you can ask yourself that right before you say it, what I found was about 90% of the time, it was really about me. It wasn't adding to the conversation necessarily, it was actually detracting. And so I stopped saying them. And then all of a sudden I realized that people listened to me a little bit more. They took me a little more seriously because, I mean, I'm pretty playful and can be silly, as you can see, but when you stop doing that constantly, people drop in. And then it was the other side, I think, just learning how to be more comfortable with my own emotions and feel them. And I still do it now. You know, I still get uncomfortable and I'll do something like, oh, I did it again. But I catch it faster. So just slowly but surely you'll see yourself doing it and then it'll get better. But you'll still do it, but then you notice it and stuff. But yeah, it's just kind of taking that pause, asking yourself if it's really important to this conversation, is going to help, is it appropriate, all that kind of stuff. Slowing down. Are you a high I?
Yeah. ID.
ID? Okay. Yeah, I'm high folk, yeah. So yeah, it's harder for us because we're very emotional and we like to, and it does feel very uncomfortable and it's easy to do that, right? So, but just slowing down. So, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Gabby.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
So, my question is about managing your ego in terms of self-confidence, and I'll tell you what happens to me particularly. I'm never like nasty to people, but I tend to have this attitude sometimes where I allow myself to make a bad choice because I'm like, I can do anything, I'll fix it later. And then of course later comes and I don't, and then I have a bigger mess on my hands. And it's like, how do you tread that line between being confident and being arrogant?
Yes, that is a really good question. So you feel like sometimes you go over into the arrogant realm versus just being confident?
Yeah,
Okay.
not towards people, but just like how it affects my behavior and my own choices.
Okay. I would say when you're feeling self-confident, how does that feel in your body? Like, how do you feel about yourself?
I feel tall.
You feel tall. Okay. When you go into the arrogant place, how do you feel?
I'm not sure. Maybe not this time.
I was going to say small, right? That's how I feel when I do it, because I've done that where I've been in conversations with somebody and I've left, I'm like, why did I add that last piece? Because that piece was arrogant feeling, right? And then I beat myself up about it. We want to be confident. Obviously, being confident is a positive thing. There's a big, and when I talked about value the other day, there's a big difference. Self-esteem and self-confidence a lot of times can be, well, I'll say self-esteem. So self-esteem can be more external, right? Arrogant can be more external. It's like, I'm getting this attention from people. People are laughing at me, so that means I'm good. I'm funny, ha ha ha. That makes me feel good. I'm getting money, I'm getting all this stuff, so that makes me feel good. That's the self-esteem or ego thing, right? It's all very connected to what's happening to me, and if that stuff goes away, I'm crushed. The self-confident piece is much deeper and much more about who you are internally, right? Who you really are, what you're connected to. I'm a big spiritual person, not a big religious person, but I very much believe, like I said earlier, we're all here for a purpose, and it's my job to figure out what my purpose is. And so that confidence for me has come from that, and it's taken a long, I mean, I'm 50 years old, so I feel like I'm finally getting there, maybe a little bit. But when you're confident, that's what you feel, and there's no, I'm not sure exactly the example, but there's no reason to show somebody else anything. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about me. I know who I am. Does that make a difference? So as personal development work is kind of what I keep coming back to with all these answers, honestly, is like the more I'm grounded in who I am, the more confidence I have, and the less I care about what anybody thinks. And I know what's right for me, and I'm going to do that. And if somebody likes it, great. If somebody doesn't, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. In my opinion, it doesn't. Like if I believe something, but somebody else doesn't believe that, if it's confidence, it doesn't matter if they believe it or not. That's fine. They're totally entitled to their opinion. If it's ego, I get pretty pissed. They don't believe what I believe, right? You must believe what I believe. So there's a big feeling difference. And that's why I was asking how you feel, because for me, when I feel confident, I feel strong and centered and grounded and tall, to use your word. When I'm in this arrogance place or this ego place, it feels very icky and very, like, on quicksand almost, you know, not solid at all. And so when I feel like that, for me it's about how do I shift back over to here? Because obviously I'm trying to impress something here, and it doesn't work. So how do I come back here? Does that help? Sure? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, sure.